Welcome back, everyone. And today we are going to be talking about submission and leadership, what that means in a relationship. Um, the word submission comes with a lot of
Yes,
connotations,
it does.
right? Leadership, I think we're all pretty acclimated with. We experience leadership in politics, our jobs, in our classes, when we play games, et cetera, et cetera. But we're specifically going to be relating leadership and correlating it to our relationships, your relationship, your long-term relationships, your meaningful relationships, and your marriages.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
What's your thoughts, babe?
are you? Because I'm like I've been talking, so I'm
I
just kind
know.
of waiting for
No,
you
I'm
to.
saying, what are your thoughts? Because I think we share the same thoughts with both, but I want to know your thoughts with submission as a man.
So this is what I believe, and well, before we jump into that, let me because that's a really good question, but let me basically try and outline what I think our viewers should look to get from this conversation,
Okay.
from this episode. So I think the biggest thing to essentially strive to assimilate and acquire from this conversation is what constructive leadership in a relationship looks like.
Right.
Understanding that it will vary from relationship to relationship, and then because we're going to use our relationship as a model, but then hopefully using that to then define and ascertain what that looks like, what the dynamic of leadership looks like in your relationship, right?
Yeah.
So now, with that being said, I firmly believe that all women in a relationship should submit to their husbands, and in reverse, men, the husband should also submit to their wives. The reason why, yeah, some people might be like, you're just trying to
Yeah.
be diplomatic. No, there's a reason for this because leadership is, um, it's transient in a relationship. In other words, I might be leading in one area for a specific period of time, and then I might need to pass the baton over
Yes.
to my spouse,
Mm-hmm.
to my wife, and then she takes. And so it's really more of like it's like a team sport.
Yes.
You have to know when, because it's not going to be apparent, it's not going to be obvious.
Mm-mm.
You have to know when to basically take a step back and let the other person lead in this area, or in any area, in a specific area, and then know when to take the baton. And part of knowing that, I think, is really knowing who your spouse is, knowing which areas they're comfortable in, and then knowing exactly
Yourself.
when and where. And yeah, knowing yourself, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing when and where to basically either let go, release control, or assume control.
I completely agree. I really wanted you to say that because I know that that's what you think. And a lot of people don't look at it from that perspective,
No.
especially when it comes to men, because
Mm-hmm.
they assume that all men think the same. And I get it. There are some men that might think submission is just one role for one person, but I was very intentional when I was dating, especially because I knew I wanted to date an older guy. I
Mm.
was very intentional with wanting to know his ability to be able to listen to me, even though I was younger than him. And I remember having that conversation with you
You did.
because I was like, look, I want to make sure that whoever I'm with still can find value in what I say, even though I'm younger than them. So there's not this weird power dynamic where you think that everything you say and do is 100% correct.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be times that you have to, like you said, pass the baton. In my opinion, submission is very powerful. It's a power that you're basically giving to somebody else,
It
and
is.
it's a pressure that you're giving them in leading whatever the
Yes.
situation is.
Mm-hmm.
So neither, like, submission is a thing that people talk about now, and there's feelings about it, but both things are very, very important in a relationship, in my opinion, because it's hard to lead if the other person does not submit to what you're trying to do or where you're trying to take them. Like, it's very difficult to go anywhere when somebody is just kind of like, well, no, I want to go this way. You're like, no, I want to go that way. And nobody kind of wants to be like, okay, let's try it your way. That's all to me submission is. And trusting that the leader, trusting that you married somebody who is a good leader that will allow you to say, you know what, we'll try it your way. If your way does not work, then it's my turn.
That's a really, really, really good way to explain it. You mentioned two things that I was able to draw from that, which I completely resonate with and I relate to. The first being submission is really uh, a transfer of power. Was
Yes.
kind of like how you described it, to where you're releasing control, power. Um, those words that basically emphasize ownership of something.
Yeah.
You're releasing it to your counterpart, and you're really only able to do that when there is trust,
That's it.
which was the second thing you mentioned. A lot of people basically, when they think about submission, they don't, they think about the servitude, perhaps, which is
Mm-hmm.
one form of it, or they think about reliance on somebody to basically do something for them, which is another form of it. But they don't think about the precursor to that, which is, well, for you to basically say, let me leave this for this person, whatever it might be, you need to have a certain level of trust in that person.
Yeah.
And trust pertaining to um, something that they do, or something that the way they think, the way they perceive things, the way they handle things.
Yes. Oh my
And
goodness.
that's like the first thing that we really need to understand, that there has to be trust built. There has to be trust. And trust is something that doesn't occur until things have been done, until experience
Mm-hmm.
has basically occurred and time has elapsed.
I agree.
So, what are we saying? So, submission does not happen immediately.
No.
Submission should not happen immediately, because if it does, then it is indentured servitude, or it's totalitarianism, or totalitarianism, or it's basically like what's the word I'm looking for? It's not totalitarianism. That's not a word.
Like totalitarian?
Yeah, totalitarian.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I meant to say. Sorry. It's like
I
brain
have a
fried.
question.
Hmm.
Do you feel people should have those roles in a relationship like before you get to marriage, like the whole boyfriend girlfriend thing?
I believe it would help a lot. Yes,
Hmm.
because the earlier the better. Uh, Let me look at it. Let's look at it from a practical perspective, right? Let's say you're preparing to go for an interview,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or you have an interview scheduled uh, for like 3 days from now. Is it better for you to start preparing now, or to start preparing an hour before your interview?
I see where you're going with this.
Exactly. So, the interview is important because you are now going to be, it's a type of union between yourself and your employer. You're going to be working for this employer. It's a symbiotic relationship, it's a mutually beneficial relationship where you work for your employer, you help them improve their whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, their processes, introduce efficiency, effectiveness, do your job. They in turn appreciate you and they pay you.
Yeah.
So there is an investment on both sides. Well, preparation is also an indication of how vested you are in the job. And it's an indication not just to the employer, but to yourself. Because you have to, I truly believe that if you don't take your job seriously, you won't do serious and efficient work.
You might lose
It's
your job.
it's like how athletes are ready to go on the field, and they have to hype themselves up.
Yeah.
You have to basically, and so it's the same thing in this area as well. It's one of those things where it's the more you prepare, the better equipped you are, and the better. I don't want to use the word prepare because I said the more you prepare, but the better situated that you
Mm-hmm.
are to essentially handle submission and knowing when to submit. The thing about submission that, as we said, this is going to be a little redundant. The thing about submission that a lot of people miss is that you require submission as you also submit. So
Yes.
if these
That
two
part.
things go
Mm-hmm.
in parallel, a lot of people just say, "Well, you gotta submit to me."
That's the problem. They're not filling in what you just said.
So I would even argue this is speculative now. This is very philosophical. This is like extra points, extra credit. But A lot of people may not teach this. So if you want somebody to submit to you, you should submit first. That's my theory.
Hmm.
And the reason why is because of a specific human characteristic that a lot of people, in fact, all human beings want to feel a sense of importance. We are naturally predisposed to be self centered. So the minute you satisfy that natural feeling and want and zeal to be self centered in another person, not only do you tap into that very subliminal, very subconscious, like happy place of that person, but you also compel them to reciprocate because they know that they are in a relationship with you. If they don't reciprocate, then you know that they are just complete assholes. I mean, it's just really the truth. Just look at it. It's exactly what happens when you open the door for somebody, right? You might open the door for somebody, and like there might be two doors, like in a mall. So you open the first door, and the person walks through. More times than not, the person will open the
The
door for
second
you.
one.
Not just because like they are nice people, but they want to return the
The
gesture
favor.
to show appreciation. And sometimes it's weird for me because I'm like, no, 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 no. Like I'm opening the door for you. You go through. Um, but I acknowledge that as well because and those people might be assholes, but there's something about being put on the spot to rise to an occasion of reciprocating goodness that people feel subconsciously compelled to do. So, how much more in a relationship when you are submitting, you're giving somebody exactly what they want. If they haven't given it to you, they're gonna be like, yo, what does this person want? Because I kind of feel weird just taking all the time. Now, I'm not saying that you should just do that as a tactic. I'm saying, just like in relationships, just like with people, the more you put out first, the quicker it is for the mutual benefit and the reciprocation of what you're looking for in a relationship.
That is legit a strategy that I would suggest everybody do. Like it may come off like a strategy. It may come off as something that's being slick. But no, that's just how it is. That's how we're wired. Because I completely agree.
It depends on how you look at it too, but I completely agree with you
Yeah, it's
too.
perspective.
That some people might look at it as a strategy, but it really is just
It's perspective.
selflessness.
It's truly
Because if you strategize to be selfless, when you do perform selfless acts, are you not selfless? Does it matter how you became selfless? I mean, like, it's not like getting rich where it's like if you stole a bunch of money and got rich, and even in that regard, a lot of people don't even care how you
no,
got rich.
nobody
They still
cares.
just want your money anyway. But how much
Exactly.
more an area where you're strategizing to be more selfless, to benefit others.
Yeah.
So if you do become somebody who is more humanistic, somebody who is more philanthropic or whatever, somebody who is more selfless, isn't that what you want to do? Isn't that in of itself good? Does it matter that you had to strategize?
No, it
Exactly.
shouldn't. It shouldn't because at the end of the day, you should want to be around people who follow suit
Exactly.
and do the same things that you do. So
Exactly.
if you put yourself out there and you realize that somebody does not know how to reciprocate that,
Mm-hmm.
that means that that's not the type of person that you need to be sharing these traits with
Right.
because you can know it's guaranteed that it won't be done in return.
Exactly.
Not that you're doing things to get something in return, but why not be around people who have the same ability to submit or do something kind or reciprocate? Because it's going to be a never ending feeling of like warmth and welcome
Exactly.
and appreciation and all of
Exactly.
that that includes your partner.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you have to choose the right partner because I think you and I both have been in relationships with people where the dynamic was not two givers, but maybe one giver, one taker.
Yeah.
So it depletes you if
It
it's
does.
not well rounded.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing.
I completely agree. Couldn't have said it better myself. And the thing also too is let's just really think about this for a second. this exercise that we are saying that we need to practice more when it comes to submission, we do in other things too.
Yep.
Like, do you wait for somebody to get you a gift that you love, right? Somebody that you love and really care about. Do you wait for them to get you a gift before you get them one? Like,
Right.
like
No.
you don't think to yourself like you want to get them a gift because you love them and you want to get them a gift. It's
Right.
only when you've gotten them gifts and you've done things for them, and then like 3 Christmases, 4 Christmases have gone by, and this person has not gotten you a gift, that you then start rationalizing and thinking in your mind, like, huh, did I really get this person a gift?
Yeah.
And then that's when you probably could make the conclusion that, well, it's pointless to get this person a gift. Well, Babe is saying exactly the same thing. And why not practice that same thing when it comes to submission? You submit to somebody in the hope. You're not doing it because you want something back, but you hope. I mean, you kind of do. You kind of want them to reciprocate, but you can only hope that they
Right.
do. And if you do that a couple times and they don't, in turn, not only recognize that they need to also submit for there to be mutual understanding, but if they don't do it multiple times, in multiple instances, maybe 20, 30, I don't know what a good number would be. It varies from people to people.
2.
Then,
You got 2
two,
times. You
golly.
got 2 times.
But then you know that, maybe this is not something that
Yeah.
this person
That they're
is
into.
even willing to do. And is this something I can deal with? Is this a core need is this a core value of mine to which I can either make amends in, or not amends in, but
Accommodations.
accommodate, or just completely not,
Yep.
right? So,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like that whole dynamic, like when people hear the word submission and even leadership, their mind goes to what they don't want to deal with.
yes.
It never goes to, well, obviously I'm talking about somebody that's also leading you somewhere.
Yep.
Obviously, when I say submit, I'm referring to you submitting to somebody that you can trust. But because of relationships or experiences that we've had, our mind does not go to the obvious. It goes to experience. It goes to, well, the last time I tried to let somebody lead, they led me to the pits of hell. Well, the last time this
Exactly.
happened, da 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 da. And it's like, yeah, but look at the type of person you were trying to allow to lead you. They
So-
didn't have leadership.
Right. I'm sorry, my love. But that is a really good point, and that is an important segue. What you said, which is look at the person that you were allowing to lead you, right? Because and that kind of takes us into leadership because we've been talking about
Yeah,
submission.
yeah.
So with leadership, as Babe said, you do not just allow anyone to lead. So what does this mean? If you're in a relationship with somebody, this person is going to have to lead you at different points in time,
Yep.
as you would also need to lead them. If this person can neither lead nor be led, ask yourself why you're in a relationship with this
That
person.
part, yes.
Because go back to start, don't collect 200. Go and figure out whether or not this is actually something that you can be in and it be fruitful. Because leadership, as I mentioned, you take turns.
Yeah.
You pass the baton
Yep.
based on the capacity to lead of the other person, and especially within that overall, and especially within the moment within which you want that person to lead. But it also takes your capacity as well and knowing yourself. And which is why knowing the person and truly knowing who the person is and vetting that person is important, because you may have to tell that person, bring awareness to that person that, hey, this is an area where I might have to lead. They may not even be aware of it.
Yeah.
That's not saying that that's a bad thing. Sometimes people like myself, we may not even know when we have to just be like, you know what, let me just pass the baton over. Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, you trying to fill them?
Yo,
What you trying to do?
they do look amazing.
What you trying to do?
But let's not digress.
trying to
a little
lead
bit
over
before we turn this into
You trying
something else. But sometimes I'm not aware because I'm just in the moment. I might be bothered with a situation or flustered or completely overwhelmed. I may not even know when I need to pass the baton over to or even because leadership is not necessarily taking over. Doesn't necessarily mean taking over or taking control of a situation. It could even mean in a specific form just asking for help and
Yes.
advice,
Yeah.
right? Because what is leadership? Leadership is basically submitting to somebody a resource or an act or an endeavor or like a type of function, whether it's you are submitting control, whether you're submitting oversight, whether you're submitting just there's so many things, right? So knowing when to do that and knowing even how to do that constitutes some of the lesser components of leadership. That's the reason why we have servant leaders, right? Because think about it for a second. You lead by serving sometimes, right? And when you serve, you are, what are you doing? You're submitting. You're submitting.
Preaching, babe.
Yeah, it's the truth.
Preaching.
You just have to look at the anatomy of the words themselves. You're submitting to the whims, whatever it is. But what are you submitting? Your time, your resources, your knowledge. So this is how you should really think about submission. Now, apply that to the relationship. What does that mean? So let me give you an example with me and Babe. I know that when it comes to business decisions, Babe is a better business decision maker than I am. Period. I recognize that. It starts before I can even submit. It starts from, I just hijacked this whole conversation, so
No,
excuse
no,
me.
no, you good. Go, go.
It starts from me even having that awareness.
Yes, it does. Because there
Right?
was one point where you did not.
There was a point I did
There
not.
was a point that you did
And
not.
what did that create?
Arguments.
Exact conflict, which is what we
Yes.
go watch the last episode, guys. Which is what no, the last episode
don't
was
even
about,
know what episode
was
it
about sex. But
One of these episodes.
One of these episodes. Go watch the last episode, and that's the thing, because not even doing this precursory step can create conflict in place of where there should be alleviation,
Yes. And
right?
alliance.
And alliance or alignment.
Alignment, yeah.
Alignment.
Ooh, that's a good one, yeah.
Right? Or alliances and alignment. Exactly. And the thing about it is so having that awareness and then being able to, but the awareness will help you recognize when the incidents within which I need to pass the baton occur. Because if you don't even know where your weaknesses are, how would you know when you're being tested in those weaknesses?
Exactly. Yep.
So when those occurrences happen, I'm like, oh, you know what? Dang, man, this is just one of those things where like, I really need advice. I don't know what to do. No matter where Babe is, text message, call, or walk into the room. Hey, Babe, you got a second?
And even if I don't,
Right.
I just say yes.
I mean, but
Because I'm
that's
submitting.
But I guess I was gonna say you're also accommodating too, which is part of what you do when you submit. So look, we're not just trying to get you hyper. We're not like, listen, like I know we're like hitting the notes and dropping the nuggets.
I mean, you really dropping some gems.
But this is very important
yeah, it is.
because we're gonna get into this later on. What happens when there is a lack of submission in leadership?
My
Right?
failed marriage.
Right?
That's what happened.
Exactly. We know the effects of it, but what are the preliminary incidents and things that happen? And we'll get into that. But let me just round up the whole thing about the dynamic between leadership and submission. They're really two sides of the same coin. They're like yin and yang.
Yep.
And you switch between each side based on what incidents occur and the awareness and capacity of each person to either leave or submit depending on the challenge that's being faced. So Babe will rely on me. She
Heavily.
submits to me
Yes.
when it comes to certain areas. And then I submit to her when it comes to certain areas. And even in the same areas, we might be well versed and well acclimated and well knowledgeable in the same areas, but we know we take turns, right? Because guess what? One more thing, and then I'm going to wrap this specific conversation and we're going to move to the effects. Aren't you learning in your relationship? Aren't you growing? How do you grow if you don't practice? How do you practice? How do you practice if you don't give opportunities and allowances to practice? This is the reason why the passing the baton, taking turns to lead is very important. It's extremely important. And knowing, because this is what's going to happen. when you guys take turns to lead, you lead in one area, you lead in another area, you have areas where you rely on. And take note, I'm saying that one person should not be leading. And if one person is leading in every area, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So you take turns,
It's
right?
exhausting.
As you take turns, you learn. You have retrospectives. A retrospective doesn't have to be as formal. It could just be, you guys might be talking about, wow, man, I really like the way you handled that. And you talk about, okay, well, I could have done it this way, or you could have done it that way. Guess what you're doing in the conversation? You're basically taking account and taking knowledge of how you can make things better. That's how you grow in this one area. Guess what happens as you grow? Your connection becomes deeper.
Deeper.
You become a better leader.
Trust is built.
Trust is built. So these are the things that you really need to take advantage of, and not advantage of, but take account of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. I know I've hijacked this conversation.
I mean, in the conversation about submission and leadership, guess
So-
who was leading and guess who was submitting?
Listen. So let me say what happens when what are the repercussions of lack of leadership and submission? Well, we identified one, conflict.
Yeah.
But the second, and just as important, because conflict is a degradation, ends up, you degrade trust, right? But you don't degrade it as fast as the second, which is a lack of direction in the relationship. And it could be direction in the overall, it could be the overall direction of the relationship. So there could be an opinion formed on both accounts, or it could be in specific areas to where you've probably heard this. Some people might be like, yeah, I don't even trust him with money. Whenever it comes to money,
Oh man.
I'm not gonna, or I don't trust her with the kids. Nah. I gotta make sure that whenever she's cooking, that she don't put bleach in the rice. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that was terrible.
That was horrible.
But and then that has two effects. It not only erodes the trust in the relationship, but it also erodes the trust in the specific endeavor in of itself, right? So when it comes to cooking, then you basically have an assessment that this person's a bad cook. Or when it comes to being a dad, you have an assessment that this person's a terrible dad, right? So and we all know what these things lead to. They lead to divorce. That's the worst thing. They all get you to divorce, but the erasure of submission and leadership they kind of create different problems, and those problems, depending on the problem, get you faster towards a divorce.
Yeah.
So this is a very important aspect to kind of to kind of like make sure you pay attention to and work on. This is a very, very intentional thing that you really have to focus on and partake in. Both people need to do it.
I agree. Despite how light of a conversation people are having on social media about submission, I think the way that it's being displayed is what makes us as women have our ears completely closed off to it. Because it's 100% solely about benefiting the man. And they're not explaining what else happens after that. So the whole point of even this episode in general is really to kind of go more in depth about who gains what. And as you can see, we both gain something.
We do.
They're just a lot of people just aren't talking about that gain because maybe they're not aware of the gain that happens when a woman submits. And as women, sometimes we may not know what we gain allowing the man to lead.
Right.
It's a hell of a lot easier to put that pressure on him than me.
Exactly. And which leads to a third point that I didn't mention, and then I will quickly kind of summarize the benefits. The third side effect, negative side effect of a lack of leadership and submission is added stress.
Yeah.
Because one person is now picking up the slack, because you can't have deficiencies in your relationship. So somebody's going to ultimately pick up the slack, or both people suffer.
Yep.
And so what ends up happening is there's stress.
Yep.
And over time, that causes what? Resentment.
Yes, it does.
And so these are things that end up manifesting and emanating in the relationship because of little endeavors that we can do, activities we can do to help each other grow and really get more comfortable submitting and leading. Now, the opposite On the other side, there is peace. When there's leadership, there is trust, there's reliance,
Stability.
stability. There is intimacy, because now you're able to live. And intimacy comes in indirectly. Now you're able to be like, you know what? I can really trust my husband. I can trust my wife to take care of the kids. You are growing a fondness for
Yeah.
this person, because now this ends up being a quality that you like, and you identify in this person that makes you feel warm and fuzzy. So there's a lot of benefits that come from this. The people that ignore it and overlook it, they end up dealing with these negative side effects. And if they're not addressed and resolved, they could have long-term permanent effects. In the relationship or marriage, we can lead to divorce.
Couldn't agree more, babe.
Right?
Couldn't agree more. It's to make it quick and easy for women. It's like how a lot of us have heard people say, I don't need a man for nothing. Right?
Yeah.
We only say that when we had a man that didn't lead us nowhere.
Exactly.
Can you imagine how you would feel if you had the opposite? It's like, no, you can't rely on your man,
Right.
but I can. Like, yeah, I can rely on mine. I could call him right now, and whatever the situation might be, he will be. I can bank on him being able to fix it. I've been married to the complete opposite of that. So I'm aware of how valuable it is to be able to have somebody that you can rely on and say, you know what, I don't know what happened or what this is, but I need your help. I know you'll fix it.
I'll
I know
try
you'll figure
at
it
the
out.
very least.
You'll try,
Yes.
you'll Google it, you'll pay for it. You might fuss at me if I'm the reason behind it, but you'll still fix it.
Probably will fuss. I'm not gonna lie. Like, look, leadership and submission don't mean that somebody ain't gonna get fussed at. I mean,
I've had to learn that with you.
So I mean,
I've had to learn
it's
that.
all in love.
But you're the only man that I have ever allowed to lead me properly.
Wow.
Or shall I say, you're the only man that's led me properly. I've tried to allow myself to be led, but going nowhere fast. So it's a completely different feeling. As a woman who has also felt like, oh, I'd rather just do it myself because I can't rely on this. It's the complete opposite with you.
Wow.
Complete opposite. Even in areas where I'd be like, oh my God, I really can do this by myself. But you know what? It's nice to not have to exercise it. Just let him do it because that's what he wants to do.
Wow.
Like what?
I really appreciate that, love. Thank you. Yeah. And I think that's a
wrap.
it's a pretty good note to end
I
this
think so.
episode.
Yeah.
So just keep in mind, remember, leadership and submission, they're not things to be scoffed at or dismissed. They're very important. And they have a lot of benefits and a lot of side effects if they're not practiced
Yes, they
and
do.
adhered to. Well, thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time, as always, on the next episode.
Yep.
Stay blessed. Peace.